Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Bionicle Inspiration Series. Today we're going to be talking about fan submitted mocks. So all the mocks that you have sent to the email address to be submitted and put on the show are what we'll be discussing today. So it's all sorts of different stuff. Nothing in one specific theme like normal. We'll be talking about 6 fan-submitted mocks. And you might be going, but Ben, how do I submit my mocks? Well, you can do so through the email that you're currently seeing on your screen. You can send some pictures and some other information and all that sort of stuff in an email to me, and I will eventually put it on the show. So, without further ado, let's begin. The first mock we've got today is called Rudaka by Toa Time Lord. So, of course, this is a revamp of one of the old Metro Wave sets called Rudaka. So that's always something you can do. You might be sitting around thinking, I haven't got any ideas for some mocks that I want to build. I'm not too sure what to make. Or maybe there's a set that you really liked as a kid or as an adult even, that you just loved that character, you really liked the look of that set. Maybe it's worth sort of revisiting that set with some newer pieces, using more CCBS to build a Bionicle set and revamping it, giving your own sort of interpretation or light to it. That's always something that you can attempt to do. And of course, here we see a really nice example of that. So one thing that I really like is the torso design on this. So he created this sort of like kind of V shape to the torso there, and it's using some of these curved Technic lift arm pieces here to kind of form the basis of the torso there. And now if you actually look at the real Rudaka set, as well as I believe Kitongu and Sidorak as well, all three of them had that sort of torso design there, using those sort of curved lift arm pieces there to kind of form that sort of V shape, kind of get those very broad shoulders like that, and you kind of have the arms going off of the edge of the lift arm like that. And it's a really nice looking design, quite menacing looking, just the general shape of it, and it's just a really easy, simple, cool design. And that's something that I always think is kind of cool, is actually looking at sets and realizing, hey, they actually had some pretty decent designs in them. Maybe I can adapt that for my own mock. So if you're looking for a really sort of interesting, funky, cool torso design that you want to use, go on lego.com, download the instructions for Rudaka, and literally just copy the torso design. And, obviously, maybe add a bit of armor on it that's a little different to the set or whatever, but, kind of get the basis of the torso and use that in your mock. Because, if you're looking to make a really simple custom torso, the one in this set was actually really good. And speaking of cool stuff in sets, the eye design on this mock is really awesome. And again, this was the exact same eye design that was used on the actual Rudaka set, using those trans orange Exoforce robot finger pieces there as sort of the eyes on the Vaki head there, because they kind of slot in nicely and kind of gives this sort of really prominent, obvious kind of pop of color there. Really dynamic eyes there. Looks really nice. And again, like I was saying, really awesome use of pieces that came in the original set, and no reason you can't apply that to a revamp of Rudaka or any other mock that uses that head design, because it looks really cool. It's a nice use of parts. So yeah, definitely something worth doing. Also like the dress on this mock. It's not your sort of typical dress that sort of goes all the way around the waist there. It's just sort of towards the back there, but it does add this very menacing look to her and just looks really cool. It's a great use of that cape there. Adds a lot to the mock. Looks really nice. And then also this mock has an adaptation on the high heel design that Rudaka originally had as well. All very cool to see. So very nice work, Toa Time Lord. You've done a great job. But let's move on to the next mock, which is a mock by NewDrewBuilder 1992. And this is his mock, Toa Sihu version 4. So we were kind of talking about repurposing things from sets. Well, there's nothing wrong with taking a look at some of the Toa and kind of adapting how they were built. And putting those in some of your own mocks. So here, of course, taking the typical Toa Metro body design and adapting it and using it into your own mock. Because there's nothing wrong with doing that. You don't have to go custom with it. You can just keep that original design. And he has adapted it slightly, sort of extending out the shoulders there a little bit. Looks really nice. Cool idea to kind of expand upon it a little more. Looks really cool. And another thing that's really cool too is kind of adding little bits of pops of yellow into the mock here, into the color scheme. And a lot of that's done with a very limited amount of yellow, but it's just kind of that nice little highlight there. And a really nice way that he's added it is using those washer pieces. If you don't quite know what I mean by those washer pieces, we take a look at sort of, where the shoulders are, and where the shoulders also kind of connect to the torso. There's these sort of very thin little Technic washer pieces, as they're called, that you can add on. They're a really, really tiny piece. And he's added a couple of them in yellow there. And it's just this nice little subtle highlight of yellow that adds a little bit more to the color scheme on the mock. Looks really nice, and it's just a nice little accent point there. And there's nothing wrong with you doing that as well. Maybe you want to introduce a little bit of extra color on the mock, but you don't necessarily have to use very large pieces for it. Let me take a look at some of your smaller stuff and see if you can just add little pops of color in there. Might look really nice. But overall, too, using that Metru design for the whole body here, you get a very posable design because, of course, these toys were designed to be pretty posable. So you yourself get to have a very posable mock. And if posability is something you want to focus on, that's definitely something to look into. So very cool. On to the next mock, which is a mock by Hyper Shadow 263. It is called the Corrupted Crown. Awesome mock here. We've actually been talking about torso designs a lot in this episode, and I'm going to talk about it a bit more. I like the way that this torso design kind of goes up in this kind of V shape. You see those Visorak feet there, creating this sort of very broad-shouldered dynamic look there. He looks very menacing. It kind of, I don't know, you take a look at a bunch of different villains and stuff like that. They often kind of have that sort of very kind of armored, kind of sinister-looking, kind of ornate shoulder design. So it's very similar to this. And I think that's kind of an interesting way of approaching a torso design, is to kind of focus on, like I was just saying, this very much resembles the shape of a V, the letter V. And, maybe if you're kind of struggling on the way to kind of shape your torso or figure out how it's going to look or something, maybe the torso looks like a specific shape or a particular letter or anything, So, I don't know, maybe you're building a Rahi and the kind of torso design kind of resembles an S or something like that, or could even just resemble an I or something. It's just a straight old line or something like that. But just kind of having that shape in your head can kind of just help you to kind of better visualize stuff. Whenever I'm building anything, kind of what I always need to do is have a very strong image of what I want to build in my head, because I often find that when I'm struggling, it's because I don't really know what I want to build. I don't know what that is going to look like. So often I'll go online and I'll research images, or I'll look at actual source material of what it is I'm building. So I don't know, if I'm building like a Black Panther or something, I'd go and I'd Google Panthers, or T'Challa or something like that, and see, what elements of that I can put into the mock itself. So maybe, that's something you can do to approach an area you might be struggling with is, okay, does this kind of look like something? All right, let's look at some images of that. Oh, I see. Okay, maybe I need to approach it this way. And whether that's just like, you're building a humanoid character like this and you just Google some sort of basic anatomy and just sort of see how the muscles look or something like that, or kind of look at some like toys, maybe like a Transformer or just some action figure and go like, oh, I see how they've done the articulation on this. I could kind of replicate that in Lego. Just little stuff like that can kind of, it's just finding a new way of looking at what you're building, which is always a helpful thing to do if you're a little stuck or unsure of where to go next. But that's a little something that this mock sparked in me. I think that's cool. Very nice looking torso design. Very much lends something to the character. Gives a bit of personality. I also quite like the wings on the back of the mock here. Now, I couldn't really see, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe there were any pictures on his Flickr of all of those wings expanded out. They're all just sort of curved on the back there. And I kind of like that. Obviously I think this mock would look super cool if the wings were all sprawled out and looking awesome. But I also kind of like the idea that it's just sort of this kind of, I don't know, it's something about the character, like he kind of, maybe the wings, he used to be able to fly, but his wings got damaged or something, so now he's kind of just got this sort of more hunched look, or could just sort of be an extension of the cloth or something like that. It's kind of an interesting look to it. It's a bit more out there and unique, but it's kind of cool. So yeah, whether they're extended or not, I kind of like that. I think it's an interesting way of approaching it. And another awesome thing too is this awesome clawed finger design there, being able to use those Borak eyes there to get these awesome pointed fingers like that. Looks super, super cool. And pretty posable too, the way that he's built it there. Very, very cool. So overall, a really very menacing, awesome looking Makuta bad guy mock here. Very, very nice. Very cool. Let's move on to the next Bionicle mock, which is by Nova Lopez and is called Saiva. So, one of the things I really like about this mock is putting the mask on the torso there. I think it just looks really nice shaping-wise, kind of forms a nice shape, and kind of just general look on the torso of this mock looks super cool. But also, it's an interesting way of using a mask. I can't tell you how many masks, I'm looking at them right now, I can't tell you how many masks I have, and I go, you know what, I hate this mask. I'm never going to be able to use it on a mock. Like, why would I build a mock with that head? This mask is just, I don't like you. But, you don't necessarily need to look at that piece as what it was intended for. Can you use it as torso armor like this? Or could you use it as some sick shoulder pads? Or can you add something to the mask in some fashion to expand upon it or give it new light or something like that? It's an interesting way of looking at it. So, take a look at your masks in a different way in future and see, hey, maybe I could put it on a torso or something like this. Now, I quite like this mask. I probably would have easily been able to have used it in a mock, but it also works really well as torso armor here. So, always a different way of approaching things. I also really, really dig the funky head design on this mock. It's super unique. It's super out there. It's kind of this really kind of interesting, ornate crown design, almost sort of tribal, kind of very, almost sort of savage or something. Kind of looks like feathers or kind of like an interesting headdress of some kind. It's really cool. And I quite like, too, how he's used the Speedors piece there to kind of form the basis of the head itself. And so using the printing on that piece as the actual eyes on the mock is a very clever way of doing it. So I quite like that. So interesting ways of expanding across that piece and adding that cool headdress sort of stuff. Looks really nice. And overall, the mock's got this really sleek, agile look to it. Kind of lends itself to looking like she, I was saying before, the head looks kind of tribal or sort of savage or something. Kind of makes me think that she, or he, I imagine it's she. I'm like Professor Oak, man. Are you a boy or a girl? I just can't tell. I think it's super cool, though. It kind of has this interesting, like I kind of see her, running through the jungle or something like that. She's sort of a little bit more, it kind of reminds me of a cheetah. Might be the color scheme as well. Very agile, sort of speedy looking character. It's pretty cool. Wasn't anything in the email about any kind of backstory about behind the character or something, but just looking at it, that's the image that I get. If that's the intent, well executed, sir. Looks cool. So very nice. Let us move on to the next mock, which is by Quiet Mockist, otherwise known as Quiet Bow, and his mock is called Drozik, the Tainted Light. So lots of cool stuff going on this mock. I really like how he's used the net there as kind of this sort of mesh, not really a dress, but yeah, I like the term mesh or something like that around the waist of the mock there. Just an interesting use of the net, using it like that. It just looks super cool like that. I think it's a great use of that part. And another thing that I also really like on the mock is the really awesome weapon designs, kind of like this sort of, not really a sickle, I don't quite know what kind of weapon you would call it, but these two dual weapons that they've got here. Really unique looking weapon, not really seen anything like that before on a mock. I think it looks super cool and really fits the character nicely. Very nice to see. Very nice design for it too, relatively simple and easy to make, but looks really, really cool. And I also like the necklace on here too, using one of the Lego chain pieces and sort of adding whatever you want on the bottom there to kind of make a necklace. People used to make necklaces a lot in the olden days. Don't necessarily see it as much now, not that that's necessarily a problem, but it's a fun little accessory that you can put on any of your mocks, and it's relatively easy to make too. You just need one of those chain pieces or even just sort of, a Lego rope or anything really. And it is a nice little addition to put on the mock there. Could be something in their backstory of some kind, if you're writing a backstory for the mock. Good way to form character there. So super cool design, super cool look. And also like too, in one of these images here, he has these additional horns that he's attached to the mask there. Picture's a little dark, although the darkness makes it super moody and cool looking. But because it's dark, I can't quite see how he's attached it. I can't quite see. Besides the point, though, I like this little addition here, just sort of simply adding these horns up there, kind of, again, says a bit about the character, and just looks cool. Kind of makes the Evoke look a bit more unique and interesting there, too, which is awesome to see. So, yeah, really, really like what he's done there. Very, very cool looking mock. And finally, let's move on to the last mock in this episode, which is by the Night Howler. And this mock is called Clayat. There's no other way to say your name other than the Night Howler. Like, you can't say it normally. It's just a good name. So really like this mock. Quite like how he's blended the system and CCBS and Bionicle and all sorts of that into the mock here, kind of focusing a lot more system on the head of this mock so that you can get all those intricate details in and attach the teeth and everything, and also get this interesting tongue design and stuff like that. And then blending it nicely in with the rest of the CCBS parts on this mock here. Using the system is always a good way to kind of get a bit more detail into a mock. So I think it's a nice way of using system pieces there to get that detail into the mock. Very nicely done. And then, of course, this mock is primarily using CCBS pieces, and doing so is a really good idea to be able to create a really sort of sturdy, compact design, as well as being able to really focus on it being quite structurally strong as well. You take a look at the lower legs here, kind of where the legs connect to the feet. There's two areas there that are connected by ball joints. That thing is pretty sturdy and strong. You can tell it's sort of, it's got multiple points of connection there. It's got things supporting it, so it's sort of got kind of pistons and stuff like that to kind of hold itself up. It's a sturdy and strong design, which is kind of easy to do with your CCBS stuff. It's not impossible to do with Bionicle. Of course, you easily could do it. But I would argue it's a little bit more easier to do with systems. So if that's something that you're looking to do, there's an easy way of doing it. Also, he's included some of these cool photos of the mock photographed outside. And always a good idea to photograph outside because you got the natural sunlight helping you get some really solid, nice-looking photos that are clear and easy to see with the mock. But also, too, like we see here, it just kind of looks super natural and super cool, like this dragon is, in the environment that you would probably find it in. And, it's a super realistic photograph there, which is pretty cool. I quite like it. Another thing I like is just all the horns around the head of the dragon here. It's cool that he's managed to use those CCBS bones and shells there for the top of the head to create this these sort of very large horn pieces there. And of course you can pose them in whatever way you want, so even the horns could kind of curve back or something, or anything really. But I just think that's interesting, using those as actual horns. Like, part of me would have thought, I don't know, maybe that wouldn't have worked. Maybe using an actual horn piece might have worked better. But when I see it on the mock here, I think, hey, that was pretty great. So I quite like that. And I mean, that in itself is always something to do with with anything. Like, I've had people who message me before and they're like, I'm working on this mock. Do you think a black and blue color scheme would work nicely? And I'm like, I can't tell you. The only way to figure it out is to give it a go, And it's like this, if you told me, I'm going to be using some CCBS, bones and shells to create horns on the top of my mock, like, conceptually I might have been like, are you crazy? But then you show it to me and you're like, oh, no, actually that was a really good idea, So do that, if you've got an idea, give it a try, and then if it didn't work, well, at least you gave it a go, yeah, super cool. It's a very nice work, the Night Howler, really awesome, solid, big dragon build here, very nicely done, very cool. You also managed to use the Onawa torso piece here in a very nice way. That's a big sort of cumbersome piece, and that's a little harder to use. You've used it very nicely, very cool. And that's it for this fan submitted mocks episode of the Bionicle Inspiration series. That's all 6 mocks that we're going to cover today. If your mock didn't appear on the show, fret not. We'll be doing many more fan-submitted mocks episodes. After all, you voted for this episode, so you can vote for the next one. Just go to the community tab on my page, and you'll be able to vote for the next Bionicle Inspiration series episode, which, actually, you will. I don't know why I hesitated there. You will. So, yeah, if your mock didn't appear, don't worry. It'll appear in any other episode of BIS or future ones. If you've submitted it, it's more than likely that it's going to be on the show one day. Just give it time. Anyway, that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. Happy building. Be sure to check the links in the description for the mocks that you saw in today's episode, and give these guys some love, because these guys are super, super cool, as well as my social media is there as well. So if you want to check that out, you can if you want. But anyway, that's it for this episode. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now, guys. Love you 3000.